guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you've been happy, amazing and positive. I was going to start off this video by saying happy Halloween, but it just doesn't feel right after researching this case. It absolutely does not feel appropriate at all. So as Halloween's approaching, I thought I would do a case that happened on Halloween night a long time ago. This wasn't even one that I was aware of up until very recently. So when I researched this case, I was like, what? As if I never knew about this. It was like nationwide news back then. So I'm just really like confused as to how I never even heard about this case. Before I get started though, I just wanted to do my usual disclaimer that all the pieces of information that I have found and compiled for this video, I have found through the internet, through news articles, YouTube videos and things of that sort of nature. I do understand that some of the information can be inaccurate, especially because this is a case that happened so long ago. So please forgive me if there is any inaccuracy. I do not mean any disrespect at all. And because my mission is to bring domestic and family violence awareness, I do tend to stick to cases like this one. And also another disclaimer that if gore and talking about true crime, stuff like that is not your cup of tea, please click out of this video. I have way more lighthearted content that you could watch. This case happened on Halloween night in 1974. It is such a sad and sinister case. It truly broke my heart knowing that such a crime could exist, and in the way that it even happened, you know, it was just so sinister. That's the only word that I can think of to describe what this case is about. Even though this case happened a long time ago, it still haunts the minds of people in the community. You know, it's like the tale that people tell during like Halloween time, when it's close to Halloween time. And this is a case that really shook the nation and created a lot of trust issues between neighbors and communities. This case is about an 8-year-old boy called Timothy O'Bryan who was poisoned to death by his father, called Ronald Clark O'Bryan, who is also now commonly known as the Candyman. This night was supposed to be a really fun night of trick-or-treating. You know, kids get excited, they wear their costumes and they're super excited about all the candy that they collected. And this was the case for Timothy as well, but little did anyone know that the night would end in such a terror. The irony of this case is that we constantly tell our kids to never talk to strangers or to never accept anything from strangers. And especially me growing up, you know, my parents always told me to never accept candy from any stranger. And I find trick-or-treating really ironic in that sense, because we really engrave into our kids' heads that you should not consume any candy from strangers, but we still do this every year on Halloween. It seems like that's the one night that it's acceptable because, you know, there's adults with you collecting the candy. But this case is just on another level of unfortunate because, you know, you expect these kinds of things from strangers. You're more cautious with strangers. And I feel like everyone has a right to be cautious about strangers giving candy to kids and whatnot. But in this case, it was the own father of one of the kids that went trick-or-treating that night. So you just don't ever think that something like this could happen. But as the story unfolds, it just becomes more and more evil. Ronald was a 39-year-old man who was the father of 8-year-old Timothy O'Bryan and 5-year-old Elizabeth O'Bryan. And he also had a wife called Daneen. I don't know if that's how you say her name. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. They all lived together in Deer Park in Texas, USA. Ronald was an optician and he was heavily involved in his church. He was a deacon at the Second Baptist Church. But one thing I found with cases like this, like no matter how religious someone is, that doesn't mean it's going to stop them from committing a murder or committing any kind of crime. I feel like a lot of these people that murder or are like psychopaths mask their evil thoughts through religion. With people like this, if they're going to commit a crime, nothing can stop them. They're gonna do it. They're evil. They're plain evil. So doesn't matter what anyone says. they're going to find a way to do it. So the Halloween night started with the O'Bryan family having dinner with their neighbors who were known as the Bates family. So what they had planned to do after dinner was that Ronald was going to take his 2 kids along with Jim was going to take his 2 kids. They were all going to go trick-or-treating together, leaving the wives together at home. So soon after dinner finished, that's what they did. The 4 kids got their costumes on. They were super excited. It was raining that night, so the 2 dads said that it wasn't going to be a long trip. It's just going to be a quick trip just to kind of make the kids a little happy. A little bit of rain is not going to stop kids from going trick-or-treating and doing fun things. So off they went into the rainy weather to go trick-or-treating in a neighborhood close by. As they were going, the group approached a house that had all its lights off. It didn't really look like anyone was home, but the kids were going to try their luck anyway just to see if anyone answered the door. The kids were knocking for quite a while and no one seemed to answer the door, so they grew impatient and ran off to the next house. And Jim Bates went after the kids, and the only person that was kind of left behind was Ronald. Jim Bates at the time didn't really think anything of it. He just thought that Ronald kind of was walking slowly behind them, didn't really want to catch up to them. He didn't really want to run after the kids. So Jim Bates thought, oh, you know, Ronald knows that I'm with the kids, they're safe, it's all right, he'll just take his time and catch up to us when he's ready. And that's what he did. Ronald caught up to the group a little while later and told the kids that he had some good news, and he brought out a handful of pixie sticks. If you don't know what pixie sticks are, they're like these straws that have flavored powdered sugar inside them, and he pulls these out. They were really big, and said, I've got good news for you. I've got these pixie sticks from the neighbors that we were trying to knock at. Someone actually eventually answered and they gave some of these candies. And the kids were really happy. Ronald even said that those neighbors were rich because they were giving out expensive candies, because pixie sticks were known as more of the expensive candy. Keep in mind that Jim Bates or the kids didn't actually see anyone open the door of that house. They kind of just took Ronald's word for it, and that was it. The kids were just excited that they managed to get candy when they thought they wouldn't be able to from that house. Ronald gives out each of the candies to the kids. He had 5 pixie sticks. So the other one, he joked saying that he was going to eat it later, but he actually gave it to another kid who he recognized from church as the group was walking home. When they got home, Ronald prepared Elizabeth and Timothy for bed, and Timothy just could not wait to open his candies. He really wanted to have one before bed. He was craving them. So Ronald said, okay, you can have 1 candy before you go to sleep. So Timothy, apparently, this is what Ronald says, chose the pixie stick. When Timothy went to open the pixie stick, he said the contents inside, the powdered sugar, was kind of like bunched up together. So he said to his dad if he could help him loosen up the sugar. Ronald takes the pixie stick and kind of fixes it so that the sugar inside can loosen up, so that the contents of it was able to kind of fall into Timothy's mouth. This is an exciting bit of like eating pixie sticks, is when you just shove all of it in your mouth. It's the best freaking thing ever. It's so exciting. So Ronald gave back the candy to Timothy once he fixed it up, and Timothy dove straight into it. When he took the first mouthful, Timothy said that it tasted really bitter. Obviously, pixie sticks are known to be sweet and sour. So he said to his dad that it doesn't taste right, and Ronald disappears for a second and gets a glass of Kool-Aid for Timothy to wash out the bitter taste in his mouth. Timothy drank it, and then after that, Ronald tucked Timothy in bed. Less than an hour later, Ronald hears Timothy calling out for his dad. So Ronald goes in to his room and sees that Timothy does not look like he's feeling too well. Timothy was saying that his stomach hurt, he didn't feel right, and then Timothy runs to the bathroom and continuously throws up. Ronald follows him to the bathroom and holds him while Timothy's throwing up. Timothy's gasping for air. He's convulsing. There was something seriously wrong. At this point, I don't even know what Ronald was thinking. Was he scared? Was he regretful? What was going on in his head? His son is literally like dying. right in front of his eyes. This whole time you've just been so at ease with everything. This was the moment that he wanted. He wanted Timothy to die. As Ronald is waiting for the ambulance, he says that Timothy's body went limp in his arms. So when the paramedics arrived, they put them in the ambulance, and unfortunately, Timothy lost his life while on the way to the hospital. When it was time for the examiners to see what had happened, because remember, at this point, no one really knows what happened except for Ronald, but obviously, Ronald was going to keep a tight lip about what he had just done. He was like, what's happened to my child? What's going on? As soon as the doctor was close enough to Timothy, the doctor had said that instantly he knew what it was. There was a smell of like almonds coming from Timothy's breath. And straight away, the examiner, the doctor, had said it's cyanide. And when they conducted the autopsy, it was 100% confirmed that Timothy had lost his life through cyanide poisoning. The doctor said that there was enough cyanide inside Timothy's body to kill 2 grown men. This is an 8-year-old boy who has the amount of poison in him that was enough to kill 2 grown men. Like, that is just insane to me. I can't even imagine what Timothy was like actually feeling. No wonder things just escalated so quickly. To think about what Timothy would have been feeling, like to think how sick he must have felt and how scared he would have felt, like, what is happening to me? Why am I feeling this way? You know, kids can't really comprehend why. Like, if they fall over and they hurt themselves, they know it's because they fell over. With this, it kind of just happened out of nowhere, and I don't think an 8-year-old is grown enough to understand that maybe the candy did it or maybe this did it, you know? The doctor even said that the residue of cyanide in Timothy's mouth would have killed someone if they tried to do CPR on him. That's how much cyanide was in his mouth. That is an insane amount. If that's how much was in his mouth, could you imagine how much was actually in his body? So once this was confirmed that it was cyanide, Ronald informed the police that this all happened after Timothy had consumed a pixie stick. So straight away, the police called the Bates family, and they also called the kids' parents who Ronald had given the last pixie stick to. Luckily, at this point, no one had consumed any of the candy. The parents of the last kid that Ronald had given the candy to couldn't find the candy at first. They freaked out. They thought that their kid had eaten the candy, and they ran upstairs to where their son was and found that he had fallen asleep with the candy in his hand because he was having trouble opening it because it was sealed with a stapler. So it was obvious that the candy had been tampered with. One of the other kids tried to sneak in a candy, but their parents caught them and said, no, you can't have this. It's too late at night. It's too much sugar for you at night. So luckily no one else ate the candy, and the police were quick enough to contact these parents to make sure to give the candy to the cops, and all the candies were recovered. So once all the pixie sticks were recovered, it was examined by the examiners, and they found that all of the other 4 pixie sticks were also laced with cyanide. But these pixie sticks were laced with enough to kill 3 to 4 adults. So there was more in the other 4 pixie sticks than there was in the one that Timothy had consumed and died from. So that confirms that if the other 4 kids had eaten this candy, they all would have 100% died from it. Once the community had heard about this, you can imagine how scared everyone was. Like, imagine it this way: if you found out that a kid in your neighborhood went trick-or-treating in the surrounding streets near you and someone had poisoned them, that would be the most scariest thing ever. It would make you not want to go trick-or-treating ever again. It would make you just want to throw away all the candies. When the parents of all these kids who went trick-or-treating found this out, they took their candies to the police to get them tested. People in the community were beginning to not trust one another. And I mean, for a good reason. At this point, they didn't know who had done it. They didn't know it was actually the father of the child that had passed away. So people just assumed that there was some sick person out there in the neighborhood that was trying to poison and kill all these kids. People sympathized so much with the O'Bryan family. They felt so bad that, you know, one of their kids died from eating Halloween candy. When the funeral came around, the investigators actually went to the funeral as well. And at this point, the investigators kind of had to look at everyone, and they had their very tiny suspicions with Ronald. When they were at the funeral, the investigators tried to look for any bit of emotions coming out of Ronald, and they found that he was very cool, calm, collected. There wasn't much emotion. You know, he wasn't acting like a father who had just lost their child so suddenly. And they kept a very close eye on that throughout the service. And Ronald gave his eulogy, and he said some really sweet words about Timothy, which is so disgusting. And it's like he was so just blinded and he was in denial. I don't know, like, he is such a sick person to be at the funeral and give this beautiful eulogy and get everyone to feel sorry for you and get all this attention, which, by the way, he loved. He loved getting all the attention from all these people and media as well. And he, you know, said that Timothy loved playing all these sports. He was such a good boy. He was a very religious boy as well. And he said that Timothy never engaged with any strangers, which is so blood curdling to think about that. Timothy would have been more safer with a stranger than he was with his own father. Like, that to me is just like, I don't even know, just my mind can't even wrap around that fact. And Ronald also expressed that he is at peace knowing that Timothy is in heaven now. Like I said before, everyone just sympathized. Everyone felt so bad for this poor father and their mother and the poor little Elizabeth, who now had no sibling. So police throughout this ceremony really started having their little bit of suspicion. Nothing too crazy, but it was just a bit weird how Ronald wasn't showing much emotion. And later on, his wife, Ronald's wife, even said that when they were at home when Timothy had just died, Ronald was like punching the wall and making it out as if he was crying, saying, why did an 8-year-old have to die? Why? But she doesn't recall any tears coming out of his eyes. There was just the action of being angry, punching the walls, but there was no actual sadness and emotion. And people knew Ronald to be very gentle and very sweet. So for someone who's gentle and sweet to not be crying is quite strange. Even though people deal with, grief differently, your son has just been poisoned. As if you're not going back to that house to find the person who did this and beat them up to a pulp. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is the father so just, yeah, my kid's dead. I'm pretty sure every father that I know would go back to that house and kill whoever did this. So the police started their investigation and actually took Ronald to the streets where they went trick-or-treating. They said to Ronald, you need to point out the house that you got the pixie sticks from. And apparently Ronald could not remember. And the police were like, how can you not remember? Like, that was the one house that didn't answer and then apparently answered eventually, as if you don't remember which house that was. You didn't go trick-or-treating for that long. Why don't you remember? You would have gone to like a handful of houses only. So this is where the police really started suspecting and thinking something was really weird. Like, how could you not remember? The group only went to 2 streets because it was raining, remember? So they wanted to do a quick trick-or-treating round, and that was it. So out of just these 2 streets, you don't remember which house it was? Yeah, so he just absolutely could not remember. They even knocked on all the doors that apparently they went trick-or-treating, and every single neighbor there that they went to said that no one had given out any pixie sticks that night. Police were getting really, really frustrated with Ronald at this point. I mean, of course they would. Like, it's just so baffling that he just wasn't remembering. And so the police used a tactic by being really, really firm with Ronald, like showing anger, showing desperation that they needed to know now which house it was. So a couple of days later, they went back to the street and miraculously, Ronald manages to remember which house it was. So the anger tactic worked, you know. I think Ronald was getting a little bit scared and started realizing that it does look a bit suspicious that he doesn't know which house it was. The police use this tactic to kind of bait him. So if he remembers which house it was, it leaves the question, like, how come all of a sudden, after using the angry tone, he knows where the house is, you know? So from that tactic came a lot more suspicion. So Ronald shows the police this house, and the police ask him, like, you know, is there any description of the person that answered the door? And Ronald says, I didn't see the face. All that happened was that the person had opened the door, put his hand out and handed him 5 pixie sticks. And the hand was apparently very hairy, and it was a male hand. And that was it. That's the only description he had of this person. So the police were like, yes, we've got this man. This case is going to be solved. So they go to this man's workplace and arrest him in front of all his colleagues. This poor man has no idea what the heck's going on. He has no idea as to why he's being arrested. It's only because Ronald said that there was a man that gave these candies and it's got to be him. So, of course, that's what the police assumed was right. And once they confirmed that a man, in fact, did own the house, it was kind of like, okay, yes, it's got to be him. So at this point, they think the case is solved, case closed, done. But the man had a huge alibi. On the night of Halloween, this man was actually working in the airport till 11 p.m. And 200 of his colleagues can even confirm that he, in fact, was at work on Halloween night. There was someone at home at his house, which was his wife and his daughter. However, they ran out of candy, so they turned off all the lights so that no one would come to the house. But obviously there were people still knocking, but they didn't answer any doors because they ran out of candy. They didn't want to, you know, answer the door and disappoint kids. And so even in addition to this, like I said, the police found that no one gave pixie sticks out. So with that alibi and like knowing that no one gave any pixie sticks out, where did the pixie sticks come from? The only person that originally had the pixie sticks were Ronald. So this is when the police were like, okay, something weird is really, really going on. I mean, they already had their suspicions, but this is kind of like solidified the fact that this could be something a lot more sinister. As the investigation furthered, they did some digging on Ronald, and they found that Ronald was actually in $100K debt. And back in 1974, that equated to about $500,000. So it was a lot more money back then than it is nowadays. I mean, $100K to me is a lot, but in these days, it doesn't equate to $500,000. $100K is $100K. They also found that Ronald was always back and forth with jobs. He wasn't able to keep a job. In fact, he had had 21 jobs in the last 10 years, which is an excessive amount. And even at the current job that he had at the time, he was actually accused of theft and was almost about to be fired. They found out that his car was repossessed and his home was in foreclosure. And they also found out through some of the colleagues that he was about to get a large sum of money, but they didn't really question it. They didn't really know how. They didn't really ask him any of those questions. In addition to all of this, the investigators found out that Ronald had taken out a $10K life insurance policy on each of his kids, and then a month before Halloween took out an additional $20K on each kid, and then a couple of days before Timothy's death, he took out another additional $20K on each kid, which equaled to $100K, which is the amount that he was in debt for. Things started looking extremely suspicious. They even found out that the day after Timothy had died, Ronald called the insurers to ask about the payout. As if that's on your mind when your kid has just died. That even grew a lot more suspicion towards Ronald, because that was just like, indicating that he wanted money straight away. What was he doing? Why was he straight away calling the insurers? Why was that the first thing on his mind? This is when the evidence started really compiling and coming together against Ronald. The police started thinking, like, did he take out these life insurance policies in order to do something to those kids and get a huge payout at the end of it all? The investigators also found out that Ronald went to a chemical supply store shortly before Halloween, and he asked how much cyanide he could buy, but the amount that he needed was a lot more than what the chemical supply were going to give. They were only going to give £5, but Ronald was looking for a lot more and decided that he was not going to buy any because he wasn't going to get the amount that he wanted. So he walked out. The person who was working at the chemical store that day was interviewed by the police, and they were able to confirm that this was in fact Ronald, because Ronald used to wear a specific uniform to work, and he had gone in his uniform to this chemical supply store, and that is what the worker remembered. He didn't remember much of his face, but he remembered his uniform, and it matched the exact description of what Ronald wore to work. They also suspected that he put it in all 5 candies just so that it didn't look suspicious that only Timothy and Elizabeth's candy were laced. So he tried to make it seem as if there was some sicko out there that was trying to kill all these kids. So the police managed to get a warrant to search the O'Bryan family home, and what they found was solidified. When they walked in, they did an extensive search, and they found a knife that had the residue of cyanide on it, and they also found the tops of pixie sticks. Also, Ronald was going to a college. The professor came out and said that Ronald would ask interesting questions. I mean, at the time it didn't seem anything suspicious, but he would ask questions like, what's more lethal, cyanide or some other type of poison? And in 1973, so the year before that, his chemist even said that Ronald asked him how much poison would it be enough to kill a specific sized animal. I'm guessing the same-ish size as his son and daughter. Also, one of his co-workers said that Ronald had asked him if anyone can just go to the store and buy cyanide, or did you have to have a specific license? If he was asking questions like this in 1973, a whole year before the murder and attempted murders, it goes to show how long he was planning it for and how precisely he thought he was planning. But at that time, no one seemed suspicious. They just thought he was asking general questions. But now that this whole thing had unfolded, people's alarm bells started ringing. They started realizing that, wait, he actually asked really weird questions, you know, a couple months ago or last year, especially if it was specifically cyanide. So, you know, people started putting 2 and 2 together. During questioning, police asked him a bunch of questions about the life insurance policy. And when they mentioned the life insurance policy, Ronald kind of flinched, and he only mentioned the $10,000 policies on each of the kid. He did not mention anything about the other policies that came after it. Why was he hiding that? If he was innocent, he would have just said, yeah, I had these policies, blah, blah, blah. You'd be a bit more open about it. But the police knew about all the insurance policies, and they knew that he was trying to really hide the other policies from them to stop him from looking really, really guilty. And he also blamed his wife for taking out these insurance policies, when in fact his wife was the one that was trying to discourage him from doing so. But Ronald was the one that was saying, you know, we need to do this. This is something we need to do. We don't have much money. But, you know, she couldn't really stop him, and he got the insurance policy. When the police went to inform his wife about the insurance policies, she was like, wait, what do you mean about the other insurance policies? I was only aware of the $10,000 policies that he had taken out on each of the kid. And the police were like, no, he extended the policies for an additional $40,000 each child. And she broke down. I think this is the moment where it hit her that her husband was in fact the murderer of their son. She just was absolutely devastated. The police didn't even have to say that he was a prime suspect because they figured she had already figured that out. At this point, the police 100% knew that he was the Halloween killer. You guys must be wondering where Ronald even got his hands on that much cyanide. And the truth is, they never found out the source of where he got it from. They did try and investigate, but they just couldn't figure it out. So even though they couldn't locate where the cyanide had come from, they still knew that Ronald was absolutely guilty. And on the 5th of November 1974, so not long after Halloween, they arrested Ronald Clark O'Bryan. Police say that Ronald absolutely loved the attention he was getting in the media, especially when he was arrested. Even when he went in trial, he loved it. He thought he was some kind of celebrity of the town. So on June 3rd, 1975, so a little less than a year later, it took jurors 46 minutes to come up with the verdict. Obviously, the jurors found him guilty. Ronald was charged with capital murder and also 4 counts of attempted murder. An hour later, Ronald was sentenced to the death penalty, and it was going to be death by the electric chair. Ronald read out his statement and he said that the death penalty was wrong and that he loved his family and he forgave anyone who ever offended him. You have no position to be forgiving anyone. You're disgusting. No one wants your forgiveness, first of all. He also said that if he had ever offended anyone, to please forgive him. I think it goes beyond offense. Like, how deluded are you? Is he living in some dream fairyland? Like, you've just murdered a child. I don't think people are going to be very quick to forgive you. And then he closed off his statement by saying, God be with you all, God bless you all. How sweet. After this, his wife divorced him. She remarried to another lovely, lovely man, and he actually adopted Elizabeth, and they became their own little family. After many appeals and many date changes of the execution, in 1984, so 10 years, a whole decade after Timothy's murder, Timothy would have been 18 years old. The US Supreme Court decided that the death by the electric chair was too cruel and instead chose to execute him by the lethal injection. Ronald, in his Last Supper, ate peas and a steak and French fries and a Boston cream pie. He was getting ready to get executed that day. 300 people gathered in front of the building where Ronald was being executed. They cheered and they applauded and they were so happy that the day had finally come. They waited outside the building to hear the words that he had finally been executed. On the 31st of March 1984 at 12:48 a.m., Ronald Clark O'Bryan was pronounced dead by the lethal injection. Ronald maintained his innocence throughout this whole time. I think he was absolutely deluded. I think he had lied to himself so much that he started believing that he did not kill his son. This man was very calculated. This man planned the murder along with his selfishness just to get some money. He was going to kill 5 kids altogether, just for $100,000. Like, how could you be that evil? He was at ease at the fact that these kids were going to eat this candy, potentially blame it on a neighbor, and that was it. It makes me think, like, what if the neighbors that they were trying to knock at, what if they had answered? How would Ronald have placed the pixie sticks in their bags? Like, would he have done it sneakily, or would he have just like said that, I don't know, found them? I don't know, like, what would he have done? What was he planning on doing if all the houses answered the door? You know, I have a feeling he was going to just sneak it in there and couldn't locate where the candy came from, couldn't remember where they got the pixie sticks from. I mean, to kill anyone is just so messed up, but to kill your own child, to kill your own flesh and blood is just on a whole nother level of evil. I feel so sorry for Timothy's mother and his little sister that was left with no sibling, and she was so young that she wouldn't even have much of a memory of him. You know, she was only 5 years old. So I don't even know if she would remember anything, you know, maybe just little bits. The death penalty is a bit of a, you know, controversial thing, but when you hear cases like this, you can't help but feel a little bit relieved that there is one less evil prick in this world. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe and like this video, and don't forget that I post every single Monday, so I hope to catch you guys here next week. Stay happy, amazing, and positive. Bye.